Hello, today I'll be presenting on the topic, the human capacity for cruelty and compassion, through the study of Hamlet by William Shakespeare, A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini, and Night by Elie Wiesel. And I will argue that cruelty is more common than compassion in human nature. Although humans often view themselves as rational, moral, and empathetic beings, both literature and history repeatedly suggest otherwise, and we can even see this in modern-day society. When people are given power, placed under fear, or protected by silence, cruelty often emerges more easily than compassion. And while compassion does exist, it is more rare and difficult, and it usually requires a large sacrifice. My thesis is that cruelty is more common than compassion because power enables abuse, trauma spreads harm, society often protects cruelty, and compassion requires a conscious sacrifice. This idea remains relevant today as we continue to see war in many places around the world. We see gender-based violence, we see political corruption in many countries, and we see the consequences of global silence. In Hamlet, Shakespeare presents a powerful contrast between human potential and human reality. Hamlet famously states, "What a piece of work is a man, how noble in reason, how infinite in faculty." This speech suggests that humans are capable of doing great things and having high intelligence and high moral reasoning. However, the reality of the play directly contradicts this idea. Instead of acting with compassion or wisdom, characters are often driven by revenge, ambition, and fear. Shakespeare shows that the ability to do good does not guarantee moral action. Cruelty emerges not from ignorance, but from the rejection of responsibility and self-control. This contrast becomes more clear in Hamlet's treatment towards Ophelia. When Hamlet tells her, "Get thee to a nunnery," he is not simply expressing anger, he is emotionally dehumanizing her. Ophelia represents innocence and emotional vulnerability in the play, yet she becomes the target of Hamlet's internal suffering. Rather than confronting Claudius, the true source of Hamlet's own suffering, Hamlet redirects his pain towards someone powerless and someone who has nothing to do with why he is suffering. This moment reveals how cruelty often flows from one person to the next, and it shows how cruelty can also go from those with emotional or social power to those without it. We can also see that Ophelia's eventual mental collapse and death demonstrates the devastating consequences of emotional cruelty and neglect. Through this, Shakespeare suggests that cruelty is easier than compassion when pain goes unresolved, which is the exact scenario of what happened with Hamlet towards Ophelia. In A Thousand Splendid Suns by Hosseini, we could see the idea of cruelty expanding beyond just individuals and how it could become systemic. In Nana's quote, she says, "A man's accusing finger always finds a woman." This captures how cruelty is embedded within Afghan society itself. Women are often blamed, controlled, and punished regardless of the truth or what is just. Miriam and Layla do not suffer throughout their life because they are weak individuals and because they cannot defend themselves, but because the system allows them to and even encourages their abuse. Rashid's violence is often normalized and ignored, and it is even protected by cultural and legal structures at the time and in that society. This demonstrates that cruelty becomes more common when it is protected by tradition, law, and silence. However, we can also see that Hosseini presents some compassion in A Thousand Splendid Suns through a rare act of resistance. Miriam's final decision to sacrifice her own life for Miriam and her children is what represents true compassion. She gains nothing from doing this, but she sacrifices herself for the safety of Layla and her children. When the novel states that Miriam leaves the world as a woman who had loved and been loved back, it emphasizes that compassion requires sacrifice and that Miriam chooses love over survival. This moment stands out precisely because it is so rare throughout the world. And Hosseini suggests that compassion exists not because it is easy, but because it demands lots of courage and lots of sacrifice. In Night, Elie Wiesel presents cruelty on an even larger scale. The Holocaust transforms cruelty into an organized industrial system. The line, "Never shall I forget that night," reflects how trauma permanently reshapes identity, faith, and humanity. In this environment that they are living in, cruelty is not only common, but it's also enforced by the government. People are reduced to just numbers, and survival replaces morality, and fear suppresses empathy. Compassion becomes a dangerous thing, and silence becomes a survival tool. Weasel shows how systems of power can erase individuality and normalize inhumanity, and that people who speak out can even get in trouble themselves. One of the most powerful ideas in Night is the role of silence. Weasel states that the world remains silent. This silence did not cause the Holocaust, but it allowed it to continue for a while. Bystanders who choose not to act become participants in cruelty, and some can even argue that they become as guilty as the people who are actually committing the crime. And we could see that silence protects abusers and it isolates the victims. For Weasel, remembering and bearing witness becomes an act of resistance. In this way, compassion is not something that is passive, but it's something that requires action over time. When comparing all three texts together, we can see that a clear pattern emerges. In Hamlet, cruelty is often political and emotional, while compassion is rare and conflicted. In A Thousand Splendid Suns, cruelty is gender-based and domestic, while compassion demands self-sacrifice. In Night, cruelty takes the form of genocide, while compassion survives only through memory and testimony. Across all three texts, cruelty appears frequently and with support, while compassion appears briefly and at a great cost. These ideas remain deeply relevant today. Gender-based violence affects 1 in 3 women worldwide, as statistics show, and this systemic cruelty is shown in A Thousand Splendid Suns. For example, in Afghanistan, under Taliban rule, women have been denied education, employment, and even basic freedom of movement, where we see that they're not allowed to leave the house without a male escort. And we could see that many women are punished for not for wrongdoing, but simply for existing within a system that normalizes their suffering. And we could see that Hosseini's novel reminds us that this kind of cruelty is not accidental, and it is maintained by laws, traditions, and others being silent about it. There have been psychological studies that reveal how ordinary people can abuse power. The Stanford Prison Experiment demonstrated that when individuals are placed in positions of authority, they can quickly become cruel, even without actually being violent people. This directly connects to Hamlet, where political power allows Claudius to manipulate, deceive, and murder without any consequences at all. And we can see how in both cases, power removes accountability and encourages cruelty by rewarding control rather than having any empathy. We can also see that genocides throughout history further demonstrate how silence enables mass cruelty. During the Holocaust, many nations were aware of Nazi concentration camps, but still failed to act and do anything about it. And this is a reality that Elie Wiesel condemns in Night when he states the world remains silent. More recently, genocides in Rwanda and ethnic cleansing against the Uyghur population in China show how internal inaction allows atrocities to continue. Just as in Night, silence does not cause violence, but it allows it to spread and allows it to keep on going for long periods of time. Literature often reminds us that these patterns are not isolated events or historical mistakes. They are recurring human behaviors that emerge whenever power is unchecked, fear dominates, and compassion is treated as something that is optional rather than something that should be normalized. By connecting these modern examples to Hamlet, A Thousand Splendid Suns, and Night, we see that cruelty is not something that was limited to the past and something that is still continuing in our modern day society. Cruelty is more common than compassion because power corrupts, fear spreads faster than empathy, systems protect abusers, trauma multiplies harm, and compassion requires choice and lots of courage. Doing harm is much easier than doing anything that's good. So in conclusion, cruelty is more common than compassion, not because humans are incapable of doing great things, but because cruelty is supported, normalized, and protected by power and silence. However, the presence of compassion, even though it is rare, proves that humanity still has the ability to choose differently. And now I'll just leave you with 2 final questions to think about and maybe discuss with a friend or partner. Are humans naturally cruel, or does society train people to become cruel? And at what point does doing nothing become the same as doing harm? Thank you very much for listening, and hope you have a great day.